This is the Two Marketeers podcast, where hosts and marketing experts Sean Patrick and Lindsay Waugh seek to uncover what makes brands so powerful in how they impact modern society and culture.
Two Marketeers. They've got a podcast. The Two Marketeers podcast.
Hello.
How are you today, Mr. Sean Patrick?
I'm great.
Our resident wise guy.
You know what? I'm tired. I feel stiff and aged
Well, get over it.
as we approach this Canada long weekend.
I know. I'm so jazzed. I really need a long weekend. It's May 2-4, kickoff to cottage season. We are doing it.
Yeah, I'm not doing that
You got to do something.
because I wasn't invited to a cottage.
You don't want to come to a cottage on opening weekend. It's not fun.
You don't want to be there. Agreed.
No.
The pool's opening, and it's my version of the cottage, which is my lovely little oasis in the backyard. So it'll be all about getting everything ready for the summer. So
That's so nice.
it's such a good weekend. We tend to rarely go anywhere. First of all, because it's not a holiday everywhere, and also because it's just when you kick off summer and get everything ready to have a fun summer.
Mm-hmm. Let the fun summer begin.
On that note, let's talk about that May 2-4. And actually, even maybe some people don't know what May 2-4 is.
Well, give a quick rundown. Go for it.
Okay, May 2-4 is Victoria Day, so it's a holiday, it's a long weekend, so it's not assigned to a date. It's assigned to whatever Monday of the month of May. This year it is on the 20th. Am I correct?
Yeah, it's very early because it has to happen before the 24th.
And that must be Queen Victoria's birthday or something. Go ahead. Tell me I'm wrong.
Rest in peace.
So anyways, May 2-4 becomes the official kickoff of weekends in the summer.
Yeah, baby.
I used to work for beer, and it's definitely a very important promotional time. And we're here to talk about what cool people do on long weekends, like Lindsay, who go to the cottage. And that's May 2-4. Have I described it well?
Perfect. I think ever since my early years of high school, it's been the most anticipated weekend of the spring summer season because this is when school is almost over.
Right.
And summer is about to begin.
Anything you do after May 2-4 in school shouldn't matter, really, right? If you don't know it by now, you should just give up. And I think the 2-4 is from, of course, the 24th, but it's also associated with beer.
You pick up that 2-4 and head up north.
Yeah, so that's what we call a case of beer. If 24 beers, we call it a 2-4, because I don't think everyone does that either. Who knows?
Really?
I don't know.
Seems like a bunch of missed opportunities here.
We're from
Pretty
Toronto.
easy.
The world revolves around us, so let's just go with it.
All right. So in the spirit of the long weekend we have coming up, and when we post this episode, obviously will be like a month later, which doesn't necessarily matter because the things we want to talk about in this episode are not timely, even though this campaign that we're going to mention is timely.
Agreed.
So I think over the course of this season, we've been kind of getting into some really big, deep, heavy topics. And this episode is really just supposed to be a light, fun, heading into May 2-4 long weekend topic where we're going to look at a campaign. We used to do this a lot, look at campaigns and kind of talk about what we think about it. But we haven't in a while. So we're going to do that here today.
I like it.
So I sent this to Sean yesterday, an article from Strategy Magazine, and the title of it says, KD makes a case for being at the beer store. So I'm like, tell me everything. Like KD being Kraft dinner.
Yeah.
So bringing together two of my favorite guilty pleasures, Kraft dinner and beer. Who doesn't love that combo?
And your third guilty pleasure, it's just talking about it on a podcast.
Exactly. This is really the trifecta of guilty pleasures for me.
Okay, great.
The headline says the Kraft Heinz brand is having fun with beer marketing cliches for its limited time offer freebie. It says Ontarians are used to picking up a 2-4 over summer long weekends for beer, that is, not food. Katie's latest campaign puts a twist on a time-honored cottage tradition by helping locals stock up their vacation getaway pantries for the Victoria Day long weekend, rolling out the Katie 2-4, the first ever 2-4 of Katie mac and cheese cups created in partnership with the beer store. Consumers can get their hands on a free 2-4 pack of Katie cups while supplies last. And they say, as many Canadians head to the cottage for the long weekend in May, stopping at the beer store for their 2-4 is an unheralded tradition. We took the opportunity to piggyback on this consumer behavior with the Katie 2-4 24 cups of Canada's favorite mac and cheese in our most convenient, snackable format. The Katie cups were a perfect fit to provide easy snacking for the long weekend for Gen Z consumers searching for cravings and convenience. The product allows consumers to enjoy it without having to spend extra time in the kitchen during their long weekend. And I saw some really cute pieces of like digital and social content where they literally, so if you don't know, and I don't know if this is a common operational thing, but at the beer store here, they have a very long, like iconic rolling system. So that is very manual. So
Yeah, like a grocery checkout or those sort of things, right?
Yes, but it's on rollers. So like you get a 2-4 from the back, you order on a menu, on a big menu in the front, and then the employee goes to the back, gets your 2-4 of beer, sets it on the iconic rolling system and rolls it down to you. And it's literally, because they're glass bottles, it goes like click, 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 click.
Yeah,
it's like the clink,
you're right.
clinkety to happiness. Like it's a very sensory experience.
It's a very specific experience to our region, because if you buy, where in Ontario, I mean, it's changed recently, but for the longest time, the only places you could buy alcohol was at the beer store, which was strictly beer, or at the LCBO, which is our liquor control board. So at the beer store specifically, like Lindsay said, I mean, you've got the cash register, you've got the person there, they have a microphone, you have a huge wall of individual beer labels, cans, however it is, and you look and then you go up and you say, I'll take a 12 of or a 2-4 of whatever beer you want, and they'll say it in the microphone.
Bud Light, Jimmy. A case of Bud Light, Jimmy.
And it's like the reveal. You hear it starting and it goes through this little flap, and it's like, it's long. I saw that content you were talking to. It's a video where you just see the guy pushing. It's like, God, that's such a ritual. And I think it's so smart that, you know, sometimes we have to get out of our heads to realize a particular experience. And like you said, Lindsay, all the things you feel in that moment, right?
Yeah.
The clinking of the glasses.
They do the same thing with the Kraft dinner. They get it from the back and then they roll it down just like a 2-4 of beer would be rolled out. Yeah, it's so odd. I actually didn't think about it until we started talking about it right now. But like you walk in, it's very minimal. It's the menu. It smells like rotten beer because of like the return system.
Let's say sour. Let's say sour.
It has a funk. There's a funk in there that is only for the beer store. You hear the clinkety clink of the rolling. Like there's so many things going on.
The sound of the people unloading their empty bottles to be returned. The clank, clank, clank. And the lineup, the crazy lineup of people just waiting to place their order.
Yeah. So this year, obviously, as we just talked about, Kraft Dinner and the beer store are coming together to provide these 2-4s of snackable, the instant cups of Kraft Dinner at the beer store. And as a strategy, creative strategist and creative, we can overanalyze things so much. But this is just like one hell of a smart promotion and insight. And I love so many things about it. So I wanted us to just talk about this together, like what we like about it, what we think about it. So Sean, I can pass it over to you, or I can kick it off. It's totally up to you.
Sure. I mean, okay. So when Lindsay sent it to me, I'm like, okay. And I come from beer, and in case promotions, they're called. It's very promo. It's very below the line kind of, what can we put in the case for free, just like a cereal box that will make people want to buy this for their long weekend, right?
It's a tchotchke heavy experience.
The tchotchke heavy experience. And from a strategic standpoint, there is some strategy, although it's questionable sometimes because it becomes so about executing something that's going to make people want tactically to buy more of that beer throughout the summer, right? Like it's just there's a tactical aspect, and that's what promo is. It's great.
Like an example would be like a koozie, like a beer koozie that keeps your thing cold. So like it'll be in there.
Yeah.
Then you're pulling out the Bud Light koozie all summer long. The visual reminder helps keep that brand top of mind in hopes that you'll continue to buy Bud Light throughout the summer is an example.
Right. And they're things that are typically perceived as very high value when you think about getting it for free in a case of beer. So t-shirts, always a hit, ball caps, speakers, believe it or not, little, wireless speakers and sunglasses and all those kind of things. Every year is about what are we putting in case. It's very expensive. Therefore, there's a really big, I would say operationally, a really big investment from a promotional standpoint. Right?
I have a graveyard of impact speakers in my house.
Yeah, I got rid of them.
They're often associated with a suction cup mechanism.
Yep.
Where like you can either throw it at someone and it's still fine because it's rubberized, or it's suction cups. You can like suction it to the side of a boat. You can like put it wherever. They're amazing.
Yeah. So that's how I've always kind of perceived that this area of promotion within marketing. And it's kind of was the first thing, the visceral sort of feeling I had was, oh, here we go again. Lindsay, why are you getting so excited about this?
I'm so excited.
And just like Lindsay just did, where she's like, I didn't think about that. I started thinking, oh my God, it's free. Oh my God, it's not in a case. Oh my God, it's a very hyper-targeted small promotion within Ontario that will have I believe, a huge impact. But the thing and the word I take from it is its partnership in its truest form. Because it used to be they'd pick a vendor who had some kind of cool tchotchke and they'd pay that vendor for the work. That vendor was thrilled because they'd give a discount, but they'd make a ton of them. And that was the model. This is like, and I want to talk a little bit about the agency and the kitchen, that sort of stuff. But this was like, when these kind of things happen, the thing that's consistent is that all parties benefit equally and all parties are in it for the same end game. Mm-hmm. And that is to have a brand look favorably upon the people it wants to look favorable upon at exactly the right time, in exactly the right mindset. She's nodding.
Yeah, sorry. I didn't want to interrupt.
Oh, I should end with this. That is strategy. There you go.
Thank you, Sean Patrick. Exactly. So we talk about like the shift from like demographic and location based like marketing to like mindset, which is just what you were speaking about. Yeah. And I think this is such a perfect example because when we talk about that from a strategy perspective, you're like, great, theoretically, that makes a lot of sense. And typically like going into a May 2 for a long weekend for craft dinner, if you're thinking about stocking cottage shelves, it would be like target families with kids at national grocery retailers with some type of promotion to get them to buy it ahead of their long weekend. But what they did with this, which is so smart, is shifting from like, how do we target that group of people to how do we tap into a mindset of the weekend and of that occasion of the moment? And what do those people do? What are the natural behaviors? Who are the people that are doing them? And then where could we possibly put our brand, like insert ourselves here to interrupt that current consumer behavior and get our product in front of a new audience? So they're saying with this that they're trying to captivate Gen Z who are oh, do you see that bubble?
I know.
The little thumb thing came up on my video screen, which I can't figure out how to shut off. Whatever. Basically, like Gen Z is going into the beer store probably more than a mom, during this time of year. So they're like, how do we capitalize on this behavior, get into the beer mentality, get into the long weekend occasion mindset, and insert our product in front of this different audience to be able to start to resonate with the younger generation, which I think like that shift in marketing from like a family in a grocery store to a mindset around a long weekend and current consumer behavior and tapping into that is like was the first thing that I immediately loved about this.
The thing that I loved about it took me a while to figure out what it was, because I'm like, what? There's something here that's very different. And it's all great to kind of call out a cool campaign, but then you really got to think about, but how do you make this happen? You know, it's that jealous, damn, I wish I'd come up with that. Right?
Right. Yeah.
But the thing that's interesting is, okay, so what's the same? Beer, especially in that occasion though, has always marketed to the age group that we are now calling Gen Z, but I'd say the legal drinking age to 24, right?
Yeah.
And what I thought was so refreshing was this is not a digital campaign. This is not a social campaign. This is an in-store campaign that then went into the mindset of someone they typically never think of in store. Because Gen Z aren't in store. Oh yeah, they are at this key moment. And when you think about, I think Gen Zs, you know, I'm going to sound like, oh, they're always on their phone. So are we. But they're so influenced by the things on social, it's part of their life, that it's really hard to stand out, right? It is a cluttered space.
There.
I love how it's now, oh, I have an idea. Let's connect with them in the store. Where? I'm sorry?
I know. And it's almost like there's a ritual around the May 24 shop also. That's
Absolutely.
interesting. Like for the May 24 shop, you're not ordering everything on Voila and getting your groceries delivered from Walmart. As a young person, you're driving around in the car you're going to drive up north in. You pick up the people, you go and do the grocery shop together, you go to the beer store together, you go and it's like as you're heading out of town, you collect the folks, you get the food, you get the alcohol supplies, and you hit the road. Like there's almost a bit of a ritualistic nature to that specific shop around people doing it and being in person also, which I think is a cool thing to have tapped into here, that people actually are going into the store on May 24.
That ritual has its own, not only occasion, but its own title, and it's called the beer run. Like making a beer run.
You're right.
They're not creating anything new that needs to be understood before someone can actually act upon it. Yeah. They're literally slipping it in to this ritual so seamlessly that it's noticeable only once you're there and in that experience and said, oh my God.
Like genius.
Surprise and delight.
Right. Well, the one thing you talked about was the kitchen. I think for people who don't know much about the kitchen, as Sean said, they're the internal agency, but just to tell you a little bit more, is Kraft Heinz built an internal agency within their organization, and they called it the kitchen. And it behaves similarly to how external agencies work, where the brand teams brief the kitchen as if they would be briefing like an agency to do this. But I think that the kitchen is uniquely positioned to be able to pull something like this off because they are so internally connected to the brand. So you're not relying on like an external agency to say, hey, we should partner with a beer store. And they're like, maybe we can't do that, in which case it's a bit of a wasted idea. But because of the internal collaboration that happens between Kraft Heinz and the kitchen, like between the brand side and the kitchen, I think they can actually just make some of these super smart partnerships and ideas come to life, because it's not like they're not shooting in the dark. Like it really is a close relationship and collaboration there.
And I think also it's a shared end game, like right to the end.
That's right.
We've talked about independence and the value they can bring. Having the independence and the freedom to choose who they want to work with and for, right? That's partnership. Now we're talking about an internal agency. And like, as much as it functions like a typical agency would, it doesn't operate necessarily the same way. It has, and I think I just want to talk a little bit about what works, what doesn't. And clearly what's happening with Kraft and The kitchen is, on a North American basis, really making the kind of changes we all want to see, right? And it's where we said before, it's about taking agency. It's about having agency and taking it. And I look at this as an act of, when you hear what I think the president says in the article, is when they created the kitchen, it was about really doing the best work, being the best agency. But it's the marketer who needs to make that happen. And I think looking at this, I kind of said it's got to be a really specific model for it to work, because I've run agencies, internal agencies. I've helped run external agencies. I've seen what works. I've seen what doesn't. So there's a bunch of models that work or don't work within this idea of an in-house agency. And all of them have their issues. Those issues can be things like it's not appreciated as good enough, right? You're just in-house. It's things like when you're operating that way within a company that, say, is sales driven, it's very difficult for everyone to agree upon what success looks like. What I see here happening, and I've seen it before happen beautifully, I hope they can sustain it, because it's kind of like what Grip was with Labatt or whatever they were at that point. It's happened before, but the culture is what defines it.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Amen. And what it made me think is, wow, I wish I worked somewhere that something like that could happen.
Right. Because it seems very simple. And it is, which is also the beauty of it.
Well, I would say anything that seems so simple, and why didn't I think of that? The difference is it wasn't because it was a brilliant idea necessarily, because a brilliant idea can only be that after it's been executed and succeeded. This isn't about coming up with a great idea yet. It's about understanding what our shared business, the kitchen and craft, is really trying to do.
Yeah.
I just look at something like this where I can actually picture those conversations happening.
Yeah.
And that just makes me feel happy.
Yeah. The last thing about it too that's interesting is that you don't expect those two things to be together. And then when you think about it, it's actually not weird, because of like the consumer behavior is like so aligned. So I think that's the other thing that they did really well with this, is like, how can you figure out unlikely combinations that are actually like more tied together than you think? And I think that's what they did really, really well here. And I think like the kitchen has done a great job around figuring out what is like a bit of a disruptive collaboration in bringing those two brands together that like catches you off guard. But when you think it through further, it really, really makes sense. And it makes you stop and look and pay attention, which is the whole point.
And if you can make something seem so unique, yet so practical and applicable that you don't even have to question it, then that is what smart creative does. And what makes smart creative is the time upfront to make smart strategy.
I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, another great example I saw of something like that was when a tomato sauce brand and Absolute Vodka did a really weird partnership for like a penne alla vodka sauce, which in the moment you see it together, you're like, vodka and tomato sauce, like that's weird. Like, but then when you think about it, you're like, that totally makes sense, you know? So it's like, from a mindset perspective,
right,
both of those things appeal to me because of the context that they're in and because of my consumer behavior. And I see it in the moment, I'm like, that's weird. And then I think about it and I'm like, but it's not. And I think that's exactly what they've done here as well, which is brilliant.
I really, really appreciate how this is a great story that goes back to old school thinking applied to new business problems.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Sean. Awesome conversation.
As always, thanks, Lindsay. Hey, too late, but Marketeers, I hope you had a great long weekend.
Yeah. Enjoy your long weekends to come throughout the summer and grab yourself some beer and KD. Perfect pairing, in my opinion.
I'm not there yet, but guess what?
Sean needs a Tums.
They're not talking to me.
Have a great weekend.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Two Marketeers podcast. New episodes launch every 2 weeks.
Find the Two Marketeers podcast on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or wherever you like to listen. And be sure to rate and subscribe.
Listen on our website, thetwomarketeers.ca, or you can ask Alexa to play the Two Marketeers podcast.
Want to keep in touch? Follow the Two Marketeers on LinkedIn or at Two Marketeers on TikTok. We've always got something to share.
This podcast is over.